Hi, welcome to Barb's Book Spot. Hi, welcome to Barb's Book Spot. I was thinking that I'd like to talk to you about some books related to what is a leader, what is a hero, and how do we choose those people in our lives? How do we choose our champions? And if we want to be a champion or a leader, how do we find that in ourselves? What are those qualities that we need to do that? I thought because this is a particularly stormy election year, maybe that's a topic that will come up in your classroom. Maybe you want to talk about voting and how do we decide who we want to vote for. So I'm hoping these books are related to those topics for you. The first book I'd like to share with you is called How to Be a Hero. And it's by Florence Barry Hyde, and the illustrations are by Chuck Groening. This book is published by Chronicle Books, and these are all 2016 books today. The young man in this book is trying to decide how he can be a hero. He thinks that would be pretty cool. I want to start by showing you the Endpapers because there are a lot of allusions in this book. And if you want to teach about what an allusion is, a literary allusion, this would be a great text to use for that. All through the Endpapers, we see heroes of myth and legend and fairy tale. We see knights and people slaying dragons and somebody chasing a witch. And that kind of sets the tone for the narration of the book. When we get to the first page, we see kind of an overview and starts with Once Upon a Time. Again, that fairy tale feeling. We're going to talk about what's a hero. And my mind is already going to those great heroes that I've heard about, you know, the Prince Charmings and the ones who rescue damsels in distress. But then quickly we're back to a very realistic setting. The young man and his parents, and he's going to determine how he can turn out to be a hero. As we go forward in the story, he starts thinking of all the fairy tales he knows. He thinks of Rapunzel, and he thinks of Sleeping Beauty, and he thinks of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And he finally gets to Jack and the Beanstalk, his favorite story. And we see the change in the pages. We get this nice fairy tale-like border, sort of an elegant border. And I want to read this page to you so you can get a sense of the style and tone of the text. He says, one of his favorite stories was the one about this kid finding some seeds or beans or something like that, and they grow up to be great big vines, and he climbs up and he finds some neat things. There's a giant up there, but he's asleep. So the kid takes home all the good stuff, and he's the hero. And he doesn't have to even do anything. He doesn't even have to kiss anybody. That was one of his big worries, that heroes had to kiss somebody in the end. So he's got very wrong notions about what a true hero is. He's a very unreliable narrator, and that would be another literary construct that you could teach with this book. So he studies and he thinks and he decides that you don't have to be strong, you don't have to be clever, you don't even have to be brave, you just have to be in the right place at the right time. Now here is where the book takes a really interesting turn. And I marked this line because it says, so Gideon paid attention and he kept his eyes open. He's looking for that just right time when he can be the hero. He's going to be in the right place in the right time. And from here on, we go through a wordless segment. And I won't show you all of it. I'm just going to give you a feel for it. But after these words, we go through this episode that happens in the grocery store. And an event takes place behind him. He doesn't even notice. He has no clue what's going on. He misses that heroic moment. And it just so happens that he is the 10,000th customer of the store, and the bells go off, and the confetti flies, and they give him a candy bar because he is the 10,000th customer or whatever. And so he thinks, I did it. I'm the hero. I was in the right place at the right time. Totally missing this whole event that went on behind him. He didn't pay attention. He wasn't aware. And so he thinks, happily ever after, I'm the hero. And so you really have two stories in one here. You have a young man who's got some very wrong notions about what heroism is. And you've got a great story going on in just this very quick 2-3 little page wordless episode where we see a real true hero. And look at the faces of the other characters in the book too, because some of them are aware and some of them aren't. And you can see where people are looking. I think that's a good lesson to think about for how we determine who our leaders and heroes are. Where are we looking? And what are we looking for? And where do we see ourselves in that whole picture? So a very fun book that I think can be used with almost any age. I think it would kick off a high school discussion about heroes and leaders. You could read it to kindergartners and they would enjoy the story. My next book today is called Around America to Win the Vote, Two Suffragists, a Kitten, and 10,000 Miles. It's by Mara Rockcliffe, and it's illustrated by Hadley Hooper. And this is a Candlewick Press book. Now, in 1916, women were just fighting for the vote. It was not a popular thing for even to be considered to be a leader or a voter. And these two women decided they would set out to win the vote for women. So they get in their car. Alice Burke and Nell Richardson, I just want to show you their car. They get in their car and they set out to travel the country to drum up popularity for giving women the vote. And at this time, a lot of men didn't drive cars. A lot of people didn't have cars. This was dangerous. I mean, they didn't know what they were going to run into, but they were determined. They had a cause. They were willing to persevere. They took along their typewriter and they took along their sewing machine because they didn't know what they'd need along the way, and they were going to be very self-sufficient and get out the vote. So off they went. And we can see that they ran into all kinds of things. They came face to face with a horse-drawn cart, and they had to beg passage past. It tells all the cities they went to with their Votes for Women campaign. So they went to Philadelphia, they went to South Carolina, they went to Texas, they went to New Mexico. And you could actually plot that. I think that might be a fun activity for students to do, to plot the course of the women and look for all those cities and see what they looked like. Okay. When they arrived, they were guests of honor sometimes, and they were treated very well. Other times, they were talking about votes for women, and nobody would listen. I want to read this page to you because I like the tone of it. The next day, when they stopped for gas, a crowd of men clustered around their little yellow car. Alice hopped up on the seat to give her speech, but no one listened. So she told them all about the car instead. Votes for women, the men said, and they waved as Nell and Alice drove away. So they were looking for what would resonate with people. How can they connect? And then delivering their message. And there's a message there for teachers too. We see them coming into a grand entrance to California. They may all the way from the East Coast. And then we get to, the very end. And they turn around from California and they go back again. And we get this lovely map that shows us their journey. So where they started out, and then where they headed back. Now, 1916 was the same year that Jeanette Rankin was elected to Congress, and she was the first woman to be elected to Congress from the state of Montana. The end of the book has lovely back matter. There's history, a little bit of background about the characters. We have a note on the sources that our authors used for the information in the book, and some links to more information if someone's interested. So it's a lovely story. It's a great fun, some of the episodes are very funny, but it's also kind of serious. When we think about who do we want our leaders and champions to be, I kind of like people like this who are willing to persevere and fight for the cause and fight creatively for the cause. My last book today is a biography. It's called I Dissent, Ruth Bader Ginsburg Makes Her Mark. It's a lovely biography, and it's published by Simon & Schuster. It's written by Debbie Levy, and the illustrations are by Elizabeth Bedili. Ruth Bader Ginsburg was Jewish, and she was born in let me see if I can find my date. I'm not sure the date. I want to say 1920, right around there. And she was just a typical little girl growing up in Brooklyn. But the thing that happened for her, I think that set her on the right path, was her influence of her mother. Her mother said, you know what, women don't just have to be wives and mothers. Women can do anything a man can do. Women can be anything they want to be. So she pushed Ruth to try things, to be creative, to go to school, to fight for her place. And it was hard for a Jewish woman at that time. We find that in the 30s, we're still finding no dogs or Jews allowed signs, no colored signs, no Mexican, whites only. This was the world she grew up in. And so she knew prejudice and bias from a very young age. And I think she set her mind at a very young age to fight against that for all people. She became a champion against that kind of restriction and prejudice, and a champion for those who were fighting. So she goes to high school, she's the valedictorian. Because her mother dies the year she's supposed to graduate, she's not able to give the speech because she's too sad and family things have taken her away. She decides to go on to college. She gets married, and she and her new husband decide they're both going to go to law school. Now, at this time, that was unheard of. Women didn't go to law school, but she persevered. She decided she would do it. They used the word she resisted and persisted. And it says here, finally, she said she was one of 10 women who were in law school, and there were 900 men in law school. She couldn't find a job. Finally, a judge hired her, and then she worked like mad. After that, one law school hired her, then another, and then she became one of the few female law professors in the whole country. And she did all that with a new baby at home as a married woman. So she's setting an example for what you can do and how you can persevere to do the things you think are most important. So we get the whole story of Ruth. At the very end of this book, we also have some great back matter, some photographs of her, a little bit more serious and more information about her biography. We have links to more sources, and we have links to the sources that the authors used for this book, a nice bibliography. So again, another fine example of someone who, in my estimation, is heroic, who is a champion, who is a leader. And I think any one of these books could be used to kick off a conversation about who do I want to be, who do I want to vote for, who do I want to stand beside in my fight for what's right in the world. And that's it for today. Happy reading.